The American cinema has always had somewhat of a complicated relationship with ethnic minority groups, who on the one hand are held up as worthy of pointing a camera at, and on the other are made fun of in a kind of animalistic way that only accentuates their perceived otherness in relation to white America. These films, regardless of whether they want to hold up a culture or bring them down, often claim to have enough authority to accurately portray individuals of non-white cultures, treating their own assumptions as fact. Oftentimes, films that claim to have this kind of authority usually present a different culture through white eyes, with white protagonists acting as a kind of surrogate for mainstream audiences to follow and experience different cultures through. These films never really portray other cultures as they truly are, and the fact of the matter is that they have very little desire to do so. Films about minority groups are either used to reap awards, make money, or both, altering cultural perceptions in the white American zeitgeist for years to come, as well as influencing future depictions of certain groups in other films, while also serving as a way for white audiences to consume digestible portrayals of life outside of their bubble, and pat themselves on the back for doing so. After all, it's easier to give Dances with Wolves an Oscar than actually give any land back to Native Americans. Here in America, we have a tendency to portray non-white cultures through the Eurocentric lens of digestibility, compounding whole cultures and traditions into simplified images which serve to reinforce more than reform. But perhaps the most flagrant and high-budget example of such cinema is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, made by perhaps the most prolific and well-recognized American filmmaker, Steven Spielberg, who in a generation of politically minded and self-aware geniuses was a prodigy who didn't recognize cinema's true political capabilities, as well as his own, well into his 50s. So it's only natural that in his 30s, he makes something so politically absent-minded that it could be mistaken for the work of a lesser craftsman. Although The Temple of Doom is noteworthy for its cinematic artistry, it exemplifies the troubling tendency of American cinema to depict ethnic minority cultures through a Eurocentric lens, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and reducing rich cultural narratives to caricatures, thereby underscoring the need for filmmakers to engage with authenticity and complexity in their portrayals of diverse communities urgently. Now, from a pure filmmaking perspective, Spielberg's influences are decidedly classical, with the point of the Indiana Jones franchise being to emulate and pay homage to a much older kind of entertainment, one where realism was set aside to make the magic on screen appear as enthralling as possible. The Indiana Jones films have never been keen on hiding their influences, drawing clear inspiration from B pictures and serials of the 1930s and 50s, where racist and sexist tropes were presented in droves, like cattle. So much so that the normalization of these stereotypes is what Temple of Doom is attempting to emulate and satirize, quite poorly in equal and less distinguishable measures. But the film's widescreen photography, courtesy of the visionary Douglas Slocum, revitalizes older themes and times, with this film standing as perhaps the most visually sumptuous of its type, and perhaps of Spielberg's career. It is pure visual storytelling of the highest technical kind, making it exist in a kind of narrative vacuum. That being said, the filmmakers seem to be well aware of the film's visual potential, opting against subtitles for its non-English speaking characters, and having its images fixate upon the obvious stereotypes of Indians to present to its viewers, as it's much easier to present people with an image they are familiar with, rather than changing their perspectives entirely. Spielberg, clearly influenced by the guiding hand of friend and co-producer George Lucas, portrays Indians in as alien a way as possible, stripping them of any kind of humanity and instead likening them to extraterrestrials, whose lifestyles are caricatured rather than accurately presented. The film's portrayal of Indians ranges from a village of beggars to a snake-eating glutton, a child prince, a priest of black magic, and the Oxford-educated Western conduit of a prime minister. Take, for instance, the film's most infamous scene, where Indiana Jones and his companions are served a meal consisting of beetles and chilled monkey brains, playing into the stereotype of the savage and uncivilized other. This intentionally grotesque portrayal of Indian life, initially meant to be satirical, not only reinforces negative stereotypes, but also serves to entertain Western audiences that have been conditioned to find such depictions as humorous rather than offensive. The potential laughter elicited from a scene like this, and the many others like it throughout the film, underscore a troubling dynamic: the consumption of culture as spectacle, wherein the lived experiences of real people are reduced to a series of caricatures and punchlines. Additionally, another problematic depiction comes from the village of beggars scene when Indiana Jones and company first arrive in India. This depiction sees India as constantly impoverished and overpopulated, waiting for their white saviors to descend from the heavens and into their lives to solve their problems. Ella Shohat and Robert Stamm, in their book Unthinking Eurocentrism, point out, quote, "India is all dreamy spirituality, as in the Hegelian account. Shanghai is all gongs and rickshaws. Third world landscapes become the stuff of dreamy adventure. The series shows most of the unwashed masses of the third world as passively waiting for Indy to save them. Beyond this, there is a blatant class divide present in Spielberg's India, wherein the country is either full of beggars or royals, who for all of their Western presentation are ultimately revealed to be just as backwater and primitive as their village subjects, as it relates to beliefs in black magical folly. Either way, the film's stereotypes perpetuate the belief that the blatant savagery of the South Asian region demands Western intervention so as to introduce Westphalian principles and ways of life, with the film's main villain putting forth the common American theory of the religious and ideological domino effect of world religion being put into the hands of another nation. To further illustrate the film's problematic portrayals, consider the character of Short Round, Indiana Jones's young sidekick. While intended to provide comic relief and a sense of adventure to children in the audience, Short Round is often depicted through a lens of exoticism and infantilization, much like the film's Indian villains. His character embodies the model minority trope, being portrayed as resourceful and loyal, but ultimately subservient to the white protagonist. As Shohat and Stamm again write in Unthinking Eurocentrism, the third world is both demonized and infantilized. Non-Western adult characters are evil. Children are eager, innocent, and pro-Western. In this imperial family order, the modernity embodied by the younger pro-American children will replace the hidden tradition of the older nationalist fathers. Indeed, the series shows most of the unwashed masses of the third world as passively waiting for Indy to save them, from ambitious nationalists like Mola Ram, who constructs his own domino theory. In the film's Bizarro India, the filmmakers integrate Westphalian ideals of determinism and breaking free from the oppressive systems that be, which of course can only be accomplished via Western influence and violence. The film touches on India's past under British colonial rule, but makes little effort to really say anything about the nature of colonialism. Perhaps the filmmakers thought this wasn't a sufficient vehicle to say anything sociopolitically about the continually developing nation. Perhaps they were wrong. Screenwriter John Orloff once wrote that all art is political, otherwise it would just be decoration. Spielberg understood the amount of technical formalism involved in making a picture in the classical form. However, with that came a lot of the racist baggage of stereotypes generally associated with older films in general. The influence of films like George Stevens' Gunga Din and Frank Capra's Lost Horizon loom large over Temple of Doom, with both perpetuating colonial stereotypes. No film is truly apolitical, and not having a clear message is a message in and of itself. By failing to engage with the sociopolitical realities of portraying India under British colonial rule, the film not only misrepresents a culture, but also contributes to a continuing legacy of misunderstanding and prejudice. And speaking of legacy, This film has, quite sadly, had enough cultural staying power to warrant having one. Temple of Doom's images still live in other films to this day, with depictions of violent natives raping the white Christian order more popular than ever in a country that wants to see the dark-skinned and melanated as a conglomerate to be removed from their nation. As much as the level-headed and politically minded seek to disavow such a cinema of appropriation, it is our curse to bear. Temple of Doom didn't show America anything it didn't already believe. It just amplified the staying power of stereotypes and helped advance them into the fledgling millennium. As consumers of this media, we must critically examine the authenticity of the narratives presented to us, even if, on the surface, they appear to bear the form of apolitical escapism. But by engaging with diverse voices and stories, we can begin to dismantle the harmful legacies of mainstream media like Temple of Doom, instead presenting less exploitative media to our youth and younger generations. In a film where the rich tapestries of culture and existence are reduced to images of obviously heightened stereotypes, it is our responsibility to ensure that image-making captures the true complexity and humanity of all people, and be more wary of narratives and images where, in the name of adventure, anything goes.
當個橙子到生意邊嚟到 anything goes.